Welcome to America's finest fantasy football podcast. I believe we are starting, Eddie, week number 5 of the podcast.
Correct.
Regardless, we're going into week number 6. And what we always do in the first segment here with Eddie Brown, who is the San Diego Union-Tribune's fantasy football expert. That's for darn sure. keeping my team afloat. And Kevin Acee, Union-Tribune columnist and rookie fantasy football player. 3-2 on the season now, Eddie. Large thanks to you and Leonard Fournette. We'll talk about Leonard in a minute, but what we do in the opening segment, we take care of some business. We go over some things, the top stories of last week while playing them forward, because that's what we're all about, helping people with their fantasy football teams. Good call by you many weeks ago. Trade that Odell Beckham Jr. Trade him. You knew he was going to break his ankle.
Yeah,
unfortunate.
Very unfortunate for the Giants.
Don't dehumanize these guys because of fantasy football, Eddie.
I'm not next man up, but we'll get into his replacements in a bit. Very, very unfortunate for ODB. But like you said, I had a bad feeling about this season. I had a bad feeling about Beckham. He's a very talented receiver. I'm sure he'll come back, but it was a very tough break this week. And
you had a bad feeling because of the overall offense, the offensive line, and just what's around him. Oh my gosh, his replacement is certainly not on the Giants because they don't have any receivers left.
Right. I think they had literally one left standing.
Right, and now I guess Sterling Shepard's going to come back at some point here. He'll be their number one receiver, you would think.
Yeah, I would think. And he's very talented. And if you have him stashed on your team, which I'm sure a lot of teams out there do, then you just got a boost in value.
Again, we're going to talk about Leonard Fournette. I want to get to that. But let's go stay in that game there for a couple more things I want to talk about. One of them, Hunter Henry.
Yes.
Hunter Henry hadn't done anything, because he'd basically been like the Chargers were using 6 and 7 offensive linemen ostensibly, one of them being their second-year tight end. But alas, he went against the Giants' defense.
Yeah.
He's a tight end, so of course he scored a touchdown.
Of course, I feel like if you or I played that position and we faced the Giants, we'd catch 4 or 5 balls.
At some
50
point,
yards.
we'd find a seam. And
we'd find the end zone and we'd score a touchdown. They've given up at least a touchdown in every single game this season.
To a tight end.
Eddie,
what do you do then? Okay, because I don't know how deep people go with tight ends, right? So there's guys you're always going to start, right? So, but if one of your tight ends is playing the Giants defense, how does that affect your lineup making decisions then?
Well, if you have a healthy Gronkowski, it doesn't, and he's not playing the Giants, it doesn't affect your lineup at all. But what this does when we start noticing trends like this is it helps you stream. So if you don't have a number one guy that you're going to every single week, then
you're kind of like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Maybe I can pick up the guy that's playing the Giants. They give up a touchdown every week.
Okay. One more that sort of gets its genesis out of the matchup last Sunday between what was at the time 2 winless teams, the Chargers and the Giants. Phillip Rivers, a part of this class of 2004. And I'll tell you what, and this isn't just because I'm a Rivers honk, he's the best left of the class of 2004, certainly when we're talking about fantasy. Because when we say class of 2004, Ben Roethlisberger, Eli Manning, you've talked about the Giants' problems. Gosh, Ben Roethlisberger doesn't even sound or look like he wants to play anymore.
Right.
Has the time passed on this prolific quarterback draft class?
It certainly feels that way. I mean, last week I advised, which I thought I was crazy. I looked at myself when I was writing. I'm like, should I do this? You could drop Ben Roethlisberger.
Tough thing when you're a fantasy expert or a fantasy general manager.
Right.
You've got to name a guy who's always been a producer there. But you, Eddie, are an expert because you make the tough calls.
Well, it's what we have to do here. But I mean, what's really difficult is not just the name, but he still has Le'Veon Bell. He still has Antonio Brown. He still has guys there that are producing at the highest level, not only in the game but also in fantasy. And so that made it even tougher. But it was one of those things to where, well, he's doing enough for them to do all right. He's not doing enough for himself. Did I expect him to go out, throw 5 picks and 2 pick sixes? No, but like you said, with Ben, it looks like he's maybe 1 foot out the door at this point. Eli is just unlucky. I mean, everything seems like is crumbling around him. So definitely, Rivers is still remains by far. I think at this point he still has value compared to those other 2 guys who you could drop at this point or stream with a good matchup.
With what he's going to do, Rivers is going to get you 18, 21 points a week. Yep. I mean, if you don't have something.
And it does. It's regardless of whether they're going to be a good team or a bad team. At this point, they're going to throw the ball. And even if it's to Gordon caught 2 touchdowns. So I mean, he's still gonna produce.
Moving on from that game. Wow, that was a lot on just a terrible game.
2 or 4 teams.
But the fact is, there were some names in there that deserved some attention. Been hot fantasy topics. Let's talk about a guy you've been saying, wait. Yeah, I know. No, I like him, but wait. Are you finally ready to say Jared Goff is a fantasy football god?
Well, I said, hey, let's see how he produces during this really tough schedule that the Rams are facing. And lo and behold, what do we get? We get 22 of 47. We get 288 yards and 2 picks. And not only him, but Sammy Watkins didn't catch a single ball and had like 2 targets. Todd Gurley, who has been, one of the biggest fantasy surprises this year after coming back off a really tough year last year, was shut down too. 50 total yards, no scores. So, and they're playing Jacksonville this week, which is a defense that is starting to look like it's one of the top defenses in the NFL.
Maybe had a little something to do with Ben Roethlisberger.
Well, that's one. That's definitely one.
They are who you thought they are. Yeah. The Jags defense.
Yeah, no, they're young, talented. Consistency is what they have been lacking, and now it's starting to look like they're putting it together.
Okay, the opposite of Jared Goff, and again, it's a veteran guy, but never been a huge fantasy guy. And another guy You've been saying, no, this is the real deal. But hold on, Alex Smith, QB1.
QB1. And here's the thing. Okay, listen to this. I mean, outside of Brady at this point, Smith is on pace for 4,500 passing yards, which would eclipse his career high by 1,000. He's on pace for 38 total touchdowns. Only Brady's on pace for that level of touchdown production in fantasy right now. He's taking shots down the field. He's not Captain Checkdown this year. He has the weapons to test defenses. And a lot of people might be apprehensive this week, especially because he's going up against Pittsburgh and they have a very talented secondary and they're an upcoming defense themselves. But if you really dig deep, they faced Deshaun Kaiser. They faced Case Keenum, they faced Mike Glennon, they faced Joe Flacco, and they faced Blake Bortles. So yeah, they're a good defense against quarterbacks at this point, but really have they faced a quarterback? So I think Alex has a big week, and we start to recognize Pittsburgh for what they really are right now.
Jacksonville for what they are.
I'm impressed with the defense. I think, like I said, I think they're talented, young. It's all about consistency. And when we look at their upcoming schedule, I mean, look at this. We're talking about the Rams. We're talking about the Colts. We're talking about the Bengals, the Chargers, the Browns, the Cardinals, the Colts again, the Seahawks, the Texans, Niners, and Titans. The only team on that's the rest of their schedule. The only team on that I would consider a dangerous offense at this point that really has their stuff together is the Texans, of all teams. So they're a team that's been feasting on bad teams, and they have nothing but teams in turmoil going.
I wanted the Kansas City defense.
Yeah.
I had Kansas City, Houston, Jacksonville in my draft, right? I wanted the Kansas City defense. Dude, they were gone. I took Houston. Right before me, they took Kansas City. I took Houston. Right after that, I took Houston over Jacksonville.
Sure.
Kicking myself now. Should have known J.J. Watt was going to get hurt. Sorry. That dehumanized him. It's terrible. You can't do that, especially to J.J. Watt. Right. I just dropped the Texans defense. Eddie, good move, or what do you say?
Well, I think it's fair.
I'm going to go week to week now.
That's a fair strategy going forward for Houston, although they do have a pretty solid matchup this week against Cleveland. This might be the week that you would stream Houston.
That's why I should have waited. You wait until you talk to Eddie Brown.
It might be the week that you stream Houston, and then after that, go with your gut. And
I picked up the Redskins. What do you say?
That's not a bad alternative. If they're facing a Niners team, Niners are hit and miss week in and week out. The Redskins have a great front seven. Okay. They're at home. So
I just figure a lot of people, I think it was a valid question. Yes, it was about my team, but it's a valid question. I figure a lot of people thought Houston was a top defense.
Certainly. They're one of the top defenses in the NFL. Even last year without Watt, they were really good. And like I said, you're going to stream. There might be weeks going forward that you might bring them back into the fold.
Okay. All right, let's talk about fantasy football. Like, this was a rookie running back, right? That we thought, okay, maybe there's some history of injury a little bit. Didn't know, is this foot thing going to crop up? And it still may in the future.
Sure.
But we knew he was going to be a workhorse.
Oh, yeah.
And holy smokes, Leonard Fournette What is, like, why are we just now talking about Leonard Fournette in week 6, Eddie?
Well, because Kareem Hunt. Deshaun Watson. There are other rookies that are taking our attention. But if you look at it, if you really dig into it, talk about workhorse. He's on pace for 349 carries. I mean, that would be the 5th largest total by a running back, by rookie running back in the history of the NFL. I was concerned. Everybody was saying, okay, draft Fournette. He's going to replicate Ezekiel Elliott's numbers last year, and I was a little apprehensive. I was like, maybe he does Jordan Howard's rookie numbers, because I don't know if the Jacksonville offensive line equates to the Dallas Cowboy offensive line. But look at it right now. He's on pace for 1,900 total yards and 19 touchdowns. Elliott finished with 1,994 yards and 16 touchdowns. So, yeah, the people out there that said, oh, he's going to replicate Elliott, well, he's on pace for it.
Right now, I happen to have Leonard Fournette. I think he got me 31 points. It was incredible, right? But I'm still, there are no running backs left, Eddie. I'm worried he gets hurt. I mean, is this injuries are apart? We know that running backs get hurt. Has this year been more? You a guy who's big into watching this all the time?
Injuries are definitely a part of this.
But it seems like we are done with the running back pool right now.
Yeah, it's definitely tougher. I mean, we are scrapping the barrel. This is where it probably pays to play in a PPR league. A little bit more than a standard league. You have more options. But you're right. It is. We're scraping the bottom on the waiver wire. Each week we're having to get a little bit more creative. And a guy like Fournette is one of those guys you have to worry about. He is, like you said, he's capable of single-handedly winning your week. But like I said, he's on pace for 350 carries and however many more catches he's going to add on top of that. And he has a little bit of, he's not indestructible. So you kind of going to be worried week to week.
And he makes it through this week. Don't draft him that high next year.
Right. Exactly. If a guy gets, historically, if a guy gets around 400 touches, you stay away from him. No matter how talented he is, it's kind of scary going into the next year.
All right, the other rookie, and he just deserves. We'll do it quick, but Deshaun Watson, and I don't even know, Eddie, if you know the stats, how many people picked him up last week, how many leagues he's owned in, but the Houston rookie quarterback, 2 30-plus point weeks in a row.
Yeah, I think officially at this point, it's fair to say we were just talking about Alex Smith. Deshaun Watson is a QB1 going forward. He has weapons. I think once Will Fuller came back into the fold, it was just gung-ho from there. I mean, he was already targeting DeAndre Hopkins pretty much every down. Now he has somebody on the other side. It's really opened up that offense. You're talking about no quarterback. No quarterback since 1950 has had more fantasy points in his first 4 starts.
Really? The 4 people that were playing fantasy football in 1950 were keeping track of that?
Yeah. It's like, well, this is according to ESPN, so we'll take that for what it's worth. But 4 starts. You could go back. It's mathematics.
Yes, of course.
You could do stats.
Y.A. Tittle. You could figure out how many fantasy points he had. Right.
Exactly.
Rest in peace.
The crazy thing is, it's not just quarterbacks. Only 5 players at his position during that time span has scored more in a 4-game span. Of a 4-game span, any 4-game span. I mean, that's how good of a start. Now, is he going to throw 5 touchdowns every week?
No, but he is going to be exciting. He's probably going to run for one, most weeks. He just is, okay? But be it designed, be it, him reeling off a 40-yard run because, that's what was open. It's funny. This is my first year of fantasy. I'm watching that game on Sunday night. I was just hoping it would get over. Everybody was getting hurt. How about this? At the end, they go down and score. I wonder if some people won their fantasy league because Houston scored a meaningless touchdown at the end of the game. Obviously, it can come into play for gamblers, whatever. But This is the first year where I'm looking at a game through the lens of a fantasy player.
I was one of them. I actually took my stepdaughter to Hamilton. I was in L.A. on Sunday night. During intermission, I checked the score. It's the Tyreek Hill had just returned the punt for a touchdown. It's 38-20. 6 minutes left in the game. I'm like, okay, this is over. I'm going to lose by like 6 points. I have DeAndre Hopkins. After the play, we walk out. First thing I do is I grab my phone. I look down. I see the score is like 42-34. And I was like, 6 minutes left. How'd they score that many points? 2 touchdowns to DeAndre Hopkins. So it was a good night Sunday night.
That's how it is. Facebook Live question.
Yeah.
Time to trade Keenan Allen?
No, I will hold Allen. He's, in fact, I think he's underperforming at this point.
Right.
So you don't want to sell low.
Underperforming in the sense that you don't think that is something that will continue.
Right. I think he's still giving you some production, but I think he's capable of doing so much more.
Well, that's where I would be like, this is where fantasy and kind of knowing a team like I do would mesh. We're like, yeah, but at any point, this guy could have 2 touchdowns in a game, and you're going to kick yourself.
Yeah, and not just 2 touchdowns. He,
right,
14 receptions,
140 yards.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, he's a PPR machine once he gets going.
Let's keep it on the Facebook Live questions.
Awesome.
Winston or Simeon?
Winston.
That's a matchup thing. No. Straight up
Winston.
Okay.
I mean, he has better weapons and a better matchup.
The capability to go huge and also maybe to run for some things.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, we saw against New England. I was big on him last week. He had like 100 yards going into like the halfway through the third quarter. He finished with like 320 and a touchdown. So he's capable. He's another one of those guys where he's having a decent year. Still haven't seen him peak. He's still trying to figure out how to utilize Deshaun Jackson with Mike Evans, with Cameron Brate, with O.J. Howard. Doug Martin just came back. This offense is probably a week or 2 away from really gelling.
Folks, this is what an expert looks like, a guy who you just throw him off the cuff questions, and he's got an answer with 7 different layers. Eddie Brown. Before we get to your start and sit, and then me as the expert grade your week last week with your how you did. Am I looking at Torrey? This is another Facebook Live question. Torrey Smith or Robert Woods?
Well, you know what? I think that depends on what league you're in. Torrey Smith is a boomer bust type pick. He's capable of breaking a 60, 70-yard touchdown whatever week. I really am big on Carson Wentz this season. He's really developed. Unlike Goff, I think he's developed even better than what he was last year. But if you're a PPR guy, Robert Woods might be the play. Although Jacksonville's secondary is for real. So if you're a gambler, I'd probably go with Torrey Smith.
One more Facebook question.
Yeah.
I'll just keep saying one more till they stop.
They start, yeah.
But I'm just saying you one more for now. I think this is similar to one last week or one that had to do with this player because of the questions. But Ajayi, drop him?
No. Don't want to drop him. Too much. You probably paid too much of a price to plain out drop him.
Bench him?
If you have
that was the question, and I butchered it.
Well, no. If you have the depth, here's the thing with Ajayi. He's one of those perfect guys to where, man, this week if he gets 120 yards and a touchdown, call every owner in your league and see what you can get for him.
And again, he was a little, I don't want to say boom or bust, but he had huge games and nothing games last year.
Right. And one thing that really made me skeptical of him this year is that he's had knee issues to where he's not completely healthy, and he's having an issue that was a problem with him before, but he's still playing. And so that makes it really hard week to week to do, like, what is it, the matchup? Is it the competition, or is he just struggling because he has an injury that we don't know the true depths of?
All right, Eddie, your add and drop column posts online Tuesday, 11 a.m. Immediately shoots to the top of the trending on the Union-Tribune website. Just a couple highlights because there's a huge one this week, and I didn't need you to tell me to add this guy, but it really was nice to see your validation when I checked out your column. Adrian Peterson traded from the Saints, where wasn't being used, to a team that, is probably aware he's nowhere near what he was, but that's how desperate they were for a running back. So is that good news? Does Adrian Peterson need to be acquired if you need a good RB2?
Yes. I mean, he's a good speculative add. The thing that gives me confidence is that they immediately dropped Chris Johnson. So Adrian Peterson is definitely going to be the guy there.
But yeah.
Andre Ellington is going to be he's still the PPR guy. I mean, he's had 9 receptions in 2 straight weeks. He's going to catch the ball. But is Adrian going to get 10 to 15 carries? If they're up big, is he going to be the run they run out the clock with? Yes. And he was getting absolutely no opportunities in New Orleans. He's still good enough to where he could end up finish the year with like 5 touchdowns or something like that. This could be a really solid depth pick.
Be all 5 that you're going to get too. I mean, it's not like he's wasted any so far, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And so yeah, as soon as I saw that trade, I was like, this is a nice ad. We talked about how bottom of the barrel the running back pool is. I mean, this is kind of like a gift from the fantasy gods.
There's also been some wide receivers going down. So if you're going to add a wide receiver to, why don't you give me some names, some thoughts that you have?
Well, something I noticed on Monday Night Football was Trubisky seemed to kind of target Kendall Wright the way maybe Watson targeted DeAndre Hopkins in the same. Now, are we talking about the same level of talent? No. But Kendall Wright in himself is a former PPR machine who had 90 catches in a season. If you're in PPR, he's a solid ad. He's only owned in 16% of ESPN leagues and 15% of Yahoo leagues. And rookies tend to, latch on to like their safety blanket. In Chicago, that's going to be Kendall Wright, and it's going to be Zach Miller because there's nobody else. Juju Smith-Schuster, former USC wideout, second-round pick this year. He's actually, believe it or not, received more snaps and routes than Martavis Bryant the last 3 weeks. So that tells me something. I mean, for all those disappointed owners of Martavis Bryant, I'm included. It tells me that they're valuing him. Obviously, they drafted him in the second round, so it's not like he was going to ride the pine or anything like that. He's certainly been more consistent, and maybe going forward, he'll have a bigger role. He's also only owned in 3% of ESPN leagues and 6% of Yahoo leagues. I mean, he's out there. Why not? That's definitely a position that he could have value going forward.
There's some obvious drops that you are suggesting. How about the receivers for the Giants? Pick them.
Pretty much all Giants.
Right. But who in the world would still have Jacquizz Rodgers from the Buccaneers?
Well, I think the only way it's acceptable at this point is if you own Doug Martin.
Okay.
So if you have Doug Martin and you just want to keep his handcuff. Because when Rodgers is able to start, I mean, he was fairly productive the first few weeks. He was definitely productive last year when Martin was out. So if you have the depth and you have Martin, it makes sense to keep him around just in case Martin doesn't pan out or he gets hurt. Otherwise, it's fair to go for some more upside.
All right, so folks, that was a little. Not a preview because it's up Tuesdays at 11 o'clock, Eddie's add and drop column. But if you're wondering, well, what does this guy know? Well, let's give him a little grades. Let's give him some grades. Last week, Eddie said, start Phillip Rivers. Kudos, Eddie. 3 touchdowns against Kansas City Chiefs, or against the New York Giants.
And that makes it 3 straight starts against the Giants where he had 3 touchdowns. So, looked at past performance, predicted.
Start Carson Wentz. 4 touchdowns. Start Cole Beasley. Scored 2 touchdowns. That's the call right there. Cole Beasley. That's a good call.
He is somebody who's been missing from that offense. I think it was good for Prescott to get him involved. And
you picked that one out of a hat. I'm kidding. That was a good one.
I do have a hat where there is a lot of fantasy knowledge in there. But that was one of the ones that I was pretty proud of this week.
Now, you didn't think Cam Newton was going to have the day that he had. If we're going to be, if we're going to give you praise, we got to say. No one's perfect. You said sit Cam Newton.
Yeah, and you coming off his best year of the season, or his best game of the season.
Right.
I thought it was a tough matchup. I believed in the Detroit defense. He came out. I mean, one of those things that was kind of flukish to me was he ended up with a tight end, Ed Dixon, ended up with 175 yards. So there was something going on in that game that was probably not something we could have predicted.
So I think that also last week you had finally said, or maybe it was the week before, look, I believe in Cam Newton.
Yes.
And so when you say sit him because of matchup, right? Okay, right. That's what you do is you look at all that. Now, would you ever sit Cam Newton again? You believe in him and he's proved you wrong 1 week. What would be your reluctance level to sit Cam Newton again?
No, that's a great question. I think after he goes in a matchup where I was skeptical and he produces, he's back to QB1 fashion. You don't sit him unless you have like Aaron Rodgers or something like that.
Online Thursday at 11 a.m. So this is indeed a preview of what Eddie's going to think. Just some highlights from your Week 6 start and sit column, which will, again, be online 11 o'clock on the Union-Tribune website. Give me a little highlight. I would love to know, like a sleeper quarterback that you say, you know what? Maybe people have given up on this guy or whatever.
Well, we were talking about one of his new teammates, Adrian Peterson, Carson Palmer, currently on pace for 726 pass attempts. So opportunities there. He's throwing the ball. And the good thing is the Bucs have allowed over 300 passing yards in 3 out of the 4 games they've played, and they've allowed multiple touchdowns in 2 of the 4 games.
You're always picking on the Bucs every week, Eddie.
It seems like
because everyone else is.
Yeah, right.
Because the quarterbacks are.
And we just talked about me. I'm a fan of Winston also this week, so I'm thinking Arizona, Tampa Bay. There's going to be some points scored.
Notes that you sent me. I'm confused by this, and I'm positive you're going to have an excellent explanation for this. And I kind of get where you're going, but one of your starts is Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara, running backs for the Saints. Okay, so Adrian Peterson is gone. These guys have clearly defined roles. What do you mean, like, start these two guys?
Well, like I said, Peterson's gone, so now somebody like Mark Ingram knows there's no competition. He's the bell cow. He's the guy who's going to get the 20 to 20 carries and the goal line opportunity. Kamara has carved out a spot in that offense already. I think he was the safe one regardless. But for Ingram, now they know it's me and you. With Thunder and Lightning, or whatever nickname you want to come up with.
Like the Falcons' backfield or what they would hope to be the Falcons' backfield of last year.
Exactly. Devontae Freeman, Kevin Coleman type situation. The Lions have allowed running backs to score in 3 out of 5 games. There's a solid defense, but once again, that's the Saints play much better in New Orleans. That's a game that should score a lot of points, and both those guys should contribute.
All right. Eddie's start and sit column drops Thursdays at 11 o'clock. Eddie, give the folks your Twitter handle.
UT Eddie Brown, at UT Eddie Brown, and I'm always available to answer your question.
I see it that you do answer a lot of questions, and I think that people are starting to realize you kind of know what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
I mean, I said kinda because I'm just, this is a tenuous situation.
Let's
Eddie,
manage expectations.
My gosh, Eddie, it's like at least one move a week is directly off of what you say, and I'm 3-2.
That's a good place.
I can't be the only person out there who is just letting Eddie sort of be the surrogate manager of their team. All right, America's Finest Fantasy Football Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Take care.